So let's just focus on to this. By far, he achieved what no other leader on the African continent has been able to achieve to date. In just 4 years, Thomas Sankara turned Burkina Faso from an aid-dependent country to an economically progressive one. Within the first year of his leadership, he embarked on a mass vaccination program that saw 2.5 million Burkinabe children vaccinated. He preached self-reliance and banned the importation of several items into Burkina Faso. Burkinabes were wearing 100% cotton, sourced, woven and tailored in that country. And in less than 4 years, Burkina Faso became self-sufficient in food production through the redistribution of lands from the hands of corrupt chiefs and landowners to local farmers, being way ahead of his time. So Thomas Sankara stressed women empowerment and campaigned for the dignity of women, employing women in several government positions, and declared a day of solidarity with, get this, housewives by mandating their husbands to take on their roles for just 24 hours. He vigorously pursued a reforestation program that saw over 10 million trees planted around the country in order to push back the encroachment of the Sahara Desert. And as we mark 33 years since his assassination, we reflect on his life. The man known as Africa's Che Guevara, and to help us with that is Sankarist, law academic and activist, Mr. David Letsoalo. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for joining us. This concept of Sankarism, what are we talking about here essentially, and is it what the continent needs in the 21st century?
Thank you very much, Khajediak. I think if ever there was a time that Sankarism is needed and required in the African continent, it is now. So Sankarism actually is about talking about the spirit and the ideas that were advocated by Africa's noblest son, Thomas Sankara. Yeah, I'm happy that we have actually highlighted most of his milestones around his views for Africa and the reversal of what the colonialism onslaught has done to the African people. So Sankarism is that kind of spirit. From my perspective, I don't want to be talking about, getting, isms, ideologies from the West, from Europe, from white people. I would rather refer to or identify my ideology or thinking in terms of an African leader as Sankara rather than a European, let's say Karl Marx or whoever. So instead of talking about Marxism, for instance, or Leninism, things like that, because they are obviously white constructs or white, generated by white people. So I feel more comfortable to identify with an African leader, and therefore the ideals as packaged by Thomas Sankara appeal to me. I might not be, have arrived at the level of Sankara, but I'm inspired to reach the ideals of Thomas Sankara. More like those people who are inspired by Jesus Christ, they're calling themselves Christians. It doesn't mean that they are Jesus Christ. They aspire to the teachings of Jesus Christ. So in my view, I think that we need at this stage, as African people, the dejected, the condemned, to be inspired by the spirit and ideals of Africa's noblest son, Thomas Sankara. Thank you.
Have we embraced him in a way that we need to have embraced him? You look at our curriculum, not much is said in our writings about who he is. You literally have to scratch around in order to find who he is, if you're interested, that is. Do you think that has been an assassination of his memory and his legacy?
What you are actually saying doesn't, surprise anyone, because anything that is pro-African, pro-black is uncomfortable, not only from the enemy of black people, but even from within the black nation itself. So anything that is pro-black is shunned upon, effaced, erased, eradicated, and desecrated. And I think we should be, every child, every young person, every adult in Africa, I'm not even talking about South Africa per se, in Africa, should be inspired, should be knowing the teachings of Thomas Sankara in and out, more like we're seeing these deities in the preschool and primary school and so on and so on. For me, it's a travesty that people even grow up into so-called professionals and so-called academics without grasping the ideals of Thomas Sankara. And I'm worried that even some African leaders in the African liberation movement deliberately suppressed the teachings and the achievements and milestones of Thomas Sankara because his teachings have set this bar so high that most African leaders will not be able to live by those. So that is, for me, something that needs to be, for us to be said about. And unfortunately, we don't. See, the problem with us as blacks and Africans is that we are not, we don't embrace ourselves. We're so much full of self-hate. We are not angry enough to correct the wrongs. We are not, proud enough to embrace those that we have achieved, and we need to celebrate that. The problem again in Africa for black people is that we don't realize that those things that really mean a lot to our lives and as Africans, they need to be celebrated and embraced unapologetically. And those against African people, they know which things are priorities and they can actually go and kill for those things. So things that are important to humanity, to the livelihood of people, people go to the most drastic extents to safeguard those. But with regard to us, who are easily divided, who are easily persuaded by foreign constructs, and that is the point of worry for me.
You speak about pride, which is something he had. He changed the name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, which means the land of the upright man. He refused for his portraits to be put up in government offices because he believed that he was like any other Burkinabe, and he didn't want to be seen to be held in such high esteem. So when we look at it in terms of modern-day leadership on the continent, whichever government department you go to, you have faces of people everywhere. There's a big issue of contention in terms of having dropped certain parts of the national anthem out of South Africa, for instance. How do we embrace, that spirit of Thomas Sankara in making sure that some of the things that we have left unfinished actually go somewhere?
What is said with regard to African leadership post-colonialism and post-apartheid is that all these things are open, they know about them. So it's no secret. So the template set by Sankara, it should be the template that all African governments should be living by. But you know why? They are things that are not comfortable to those that handle the imperialists, for instance, those that handle our own leaders as such. You mentioned the issue of integrity and dignity. I mean, when Sankara came into power, one of the first things that he did was to rewrite the national anthem of Burkina Faso. Secondly, as we said, to rename the country into something that the people could relate to. What many people don't know is that most Burkinabe people were dejected and downtrodden and actually living in the neighboring Ivory Coast. They were like the most looked down upon people in the Sahel region, particularly. But what Sankara did was to restore their dignity. Hence, he said we needed to have the land of the upright people, the people of integrity in Burkina Faso. You can juxtapose that to what we have in South Africa today, whether we have the people of integrity. Black people do not have that dignity. The leadership does not have the uprightness that Sankara preached about. About the renaming, we have failed to rename even the easiest things, the lowest hanging fruit. I mean, in 1994, we would have expected one of the key issues to be the renaming of this country. Pre-1994, we were sure that we would be having Azania, for instance, as the new name for this country. 26 years down the line, we're still stuck with a geographical description, which is known as a name of a country. I mean, the Republic of South Africa. I mean, for me, it looks like you're sitting somewhere in Europe. You're describing this particular place, you know, in geographical terms. So we have failed to just rename. You're not even killing anybody. You're not spilling any blood. Just to rename the country. No, we haven't. I mean, I was telling people the other day that I have lived to see the World Cup 2010. I have lived to see the cricket, whatever, and rugby things. But I hope that in my lifetime I'll live to see the rename of this country into something that is acceptable, something of pride to our country. Secondly, we still have the union buildings. Do you know what union is? The union of English and Afrikaner people when they were isolating our people in terms of democracy, social and economic access. So we're still stuck with union buildings. They've got no relevance, meaning to us. Another point that many people don't even think about is the issue of our currency. See, when the Afrikaners took power from the British, one of the things they did was to rename the currency from the pounds and the shillings and the cent to, you know, the rand. We're still stuck with it. What is the rand? You know, I would have imagined we having a purely South African indigenous name for our currency, just for control, you know, to manage the process for exerting our pride. No. Coming to the national anthem, I mean, the less said about that is just a painful kind of situation where we needed to have a national anthem that will be speaking to black people who have been dejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Unfortunately, that's where we have to leave it this afternoon. David Letsoalo is a Sankarist, law academic and activist.